Negotiating from weakness. How can Republicans deal with the situation they're in Washington right now? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, the Republicans being out of power in the legislative branch as well as the executive right now of course, is going to pose some interesting challenges, at least for the next 2 years and maybe more. What triggered this episode was seeing 10 Republican senators going to the Oval Office to meet with President Biden to discuss his $1.9 trillion proposal for COVID-19 pandemic relief, and the Republicans countering with a $619 billion proposal, significantly less. And I just thought, how do you walk into that office and handle this? What's your objective? Do you go in there because you just want to make a statement before the President of the United States, or do you really want to get something done? And if you really want to get something done, how do you carry yourself? What kinds of things do you say? If you're negotiating with somebody from a position of at least perceived weakness, how do you still get as much of what you want as you can, and set the stage for future opportunities to get stuff done? Stephen Green, this is not something that I hear a lot of discussion about on conservative talk radio or TV or read about, because basically what I see there is mostly just people saying what horrible things the new president is doing and how the Republicans should oppose him at every turn. But if you're especially in a legislative body, but in any kind of entity that requires negotiation and compromise and coming together and finding opportunities, how do you cope with this and still get something done?
Well, the first thing is you may be overselling Republican weakness just a touch. The Democrats, particularly in the Senate, have two problems, and they're named Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, neither one of whom is very pleased with this idea of adding another $2 trillion to the debt right now, and would like to see a more targeted COVID relief bill. That said, I just remembered a line I wrote during the first couple of Obama years when the economy was in the tank and they were trying, well, maybe not the best method for reviving the economy. Basically, what they were doing was the Obama administration was standing with jackboots on the economy's throat while it was prone on the ground, banging it in the head, just smacking it in the head with a big sack full of money going, "Why won't you make any jobs?" And of course, this didn't work very well. If you want real COVID relief, get the government off the economy's throat in places like California and in Texas and all the rest, and you'd be amazed. South Dakota didn't have a shutdown, and their unemployment rate is lower now than it was at the beginning of the pandemic. So I think we see a way out of this that doesn't involve adding another $2 trillion in funny money to the debt. That said, we are in the opposition here, and that's never fun. It's never easy. And the Democrats have another problem, and it's Georgia. They won Georgia by promising everybody $2,000, and then they cut it down to $1,400, and they might not even get that. And this is frustrating a lot of really pissed off Georgians who were promised their free money, and now they're going to get less than they were promised, even in the best case scenario. So in this case, it may behoove the Republicans to dig in their heels and hurt the Democrats in the state they shouldn't have won and might not really have won very fairly.
Bill Whittle, it's always hard to tell from the outside, as we are looking in, what's really going on in negotiations like this, because the things that people are saying publicly are not necessarily the things that they're saying to each other privately. And you wonder, sometimes I wonder whether these people are really crafty and they're going in there and basically the president will say, "Look, Bob, I know you need to appeal to voters in your district, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to say this in public that will be kind of throwing you a bone, and that'll look good for your voters, and I need your support over here on this other thing." And they're like horse trading, and then Bob goes out and says the president is, nothing but an obstructionist, and he won't give us what we want, but he's already told the president he was going to say that, and so you wonder whether a lot of that's going on, or the public statements you hear are really just people who have no sense of prudence, diplomacy, control, or skill at negotiation, and they're just exploding at the mouth when they get out in public. Do you think there's something that we're not seeing in the public pronouncements that really is going on behind the scenes? And if so, does that present an opportunity for Republicans to take advantage as best they can of their current straits?
Well, as you describe things, what you're not seeing is integrity. And I don't particularly see that Republicans are going to be riding that white horse into Camelot anytime soon. It comes down to the political class. You know, when we were discussing this in the backstage show about what you should do if you were a Republican representative or senator, what would be the appropriate course of action? Now, me personally, I'm not going to the White House, but you're still there to do a job. And so your job is to represent the people of the state that sent you there. And as we discussed in the backstage show, sometimes people feel like they have to do something different than what they originally campaigned on. So to give you a one sentence answer, Scott, to me, if it were me and I was a Republican in Washington right now, I would vote the way I campaigned. I'd try to be the person I claimed I was going to be when I was elected, and that means that I will look at every piece of legislation that comes in front of me, and I'll make a decision based on that. I think this whole horse trading thing is what gets us into this horrific trouble in the first place. I think it breeds cynicism and cronyism and corruption and all the rest of it. I've never liked the idea of saying, hey, if we take federal money that doesn't really belong in Alabama, but if you agree to vote for that to go to Alabama, then I'll agree to vote for federal money that doesn't really belong in Wisconsin to go to Wisconsin. And this is the source of all of our problems. If a bill is good for you, we're operating on the federal level now. And now you're talking about the government of the United States, the federal level. And your vote should be predicated on whether or not you think this is good for the people of the United States at the federal level within the confines of the Constitution. That's the kind of representative I would be. I can't tell you what kind of representatives they are, but I don't see the cooperation. Let me rephrase that. I will cooperate with the opposition if that cooperation is about something that I believe is good for the country. And when I say cooperate, I mean I will not oppose them. But there's so little out there that's seems to be good for the country that I'm sure I'd be opposing everybody. And this is a great example. You know, what is your choice if you're faced with this? If you got a $2 trillion spending bill or a $1 trillion spending bill, if those are the choices, then I'm going to go with a $1 trillion spending bill. I would propose something else, but you know, all I'm saying is this: you campaigned, as you pointed out again during our backstage show. You were not sent to Washington with a laundry list of things to vote for. The people are sending you there based on your character to represent them as best you can. And that means not just the people who elected you, but the people of your particular location and locality. I think the only honest and decent thing to do is to vote as much like the person you campaigned as possible. Those were promises, attitudes, character traits, qualities that you sold yourself on. You made the sale, and now you have to live up to those things.
This is such a multi-layered question and a very difficult position to be in, as anybody in business, for example, has ever felt when they were in a position of weakness with regard to a negotiation, because you know you're not going to get everything you want. You'll be lucky to get anything you want. And so how you conduct yourself is almost as important as what you propose. And I think, as Bill has suggested, if you're elected by people who expect you to go to Washington and behave with a certain set of principles, then you need to behave with those principles. And if your principles should change, you need to be very open and public about that and expect to stand before the voters at the next juncture and face the music for that change. But I think a lot of what we see in Washington, D.C. is not really about policies or laws or executive orders. It's about posturing and preening and posing and trying to make a good impression before a particular subgroup of the electorate or of your supporters. I think you can go in there with the attitude that says, you know what? I am going to support what I can support. I'm going to oppose what I have to oppose. But in the process of doing that, I'm not going to be a jerk about it. There is a way to be opposed to something that the other party brings up that doesn't involve demonization of the other party. It doesn't involve you giving a strutting show-off speech on the floor when you know it'll profit nothing, but it'll sting against somebody. You've got to be, in the best possible way, calculating about how you use your rhetorical sword. You've got to really understand the layout of the room. And so if I'm invited to the Oval Office, unlike Bill, I go to the Oval Office. I listen to what the President of the United States says, if for no other reason than to better understand and to see him face to face and have a sense of where this guy is speaking from conviction, where he is speaking because he's got a group on one side of his party that's agitating and pushing him that way, to gauge his intensity of belief in particular objectives of his, and frankly, to let him see that I come to him with open hands in the sense that I'm not carrying a weapon. That's what the handshake is all about. It's to demonstrate that you don't have a weapon. And I think if you go into it with that approach, regardless of the policies, that if you telegraph to your opponent that, look, we're going to disagree on things, that's expected. But I will tell you this, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to go out in public and intentionally try to embarrass you. I am not going to try to humiliate you. What I'm going to try to do wherever possible is find opportunities for us to work together and to be dignified when we're in opposition on particular policies. Campaigning is governing, and governing is campaigning. And if you want to act with integrity when you get in office, then you do that in your campaign. And the next time you come up for election, you want to at least be able to say to the voters, look, we were in the minority, and there's a lot I wanted to do that I didn't get done. All I can tell you is that if you didn't vote for me last time, I hope you see a man who behaved honestly, with integrity, with the best interest of the people at heart, with a realization that even though I got elected by a certain group of people, there are a lot of other people I serve, and I have an obligation to them too. If you go at it that way, I think you earn credibility, and that builds up in your so-called sort of bank of credibility with the voters. And the next time around, when you don't look like a preening jerk, you stand a better chance of getting greater support, not only for your own candidacy, but for that of the president who's running in your party. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.